Enemy movement. The vast majority of games feature some form of adversary that you need to fight against, and this game is no exception. For a turn-based game, enemies usually need three components to be able to function: how they move around, how they see players, and how they perform actions against the player. For this video, I'll be focusing on the first two things, since actions are something that both players and enemies will be able to use, and therefore should be looked at together when I get to that point. So the other two options. I'll start with vision first. In one of my earlier videos, I already showed how I made vision work for player characters, dividing it into 8 octants and then checking if tiles block vision. We can actually just port it over to enemies and half the work here is already done. However, we can't just let them see in all directions. This is supposed to have stealth elements. Oh hey, look, 8 octants. We can give them a 90-degree field of vision, and depending on the direction they're looking at, their actual vision view are the 2 octants that connect to the vision direction. Problem solved. Well, kinda. For one thing, we still want to actually keep all octants in memory for a special situation called pinging, where they can see at all directions. I'll explain why later. The other thing that I actually want is the ability for players to be able to hide behind certain objects. How should the enemies react to this? I decided to make an extra method that the enemy uses whenever they see the player. If there is an adjacency blocking object or thin wall next to the player relative to the octant that they are currently seen in, then the enemy will not count it as seeing the player. It's easier to just show what cases count as the enemy not seeing you instead of putting it into words. Oh, but if they are adjacent to the player though, this rule is ignored, because you're not exactly pressing yourself against a wall or object to flatten yourself. Alright, that's one topic down. Now for the movement. Where do I even start? There are 4 states that enemies have, and each of them has a unique running process. I'm also thinking of a 5th one for special conditions, but without skill implementations it's hard to conceptualize that. These 4 states are patrolling, investigating, searching, and hunting. We can split these in the middle. The first 2 are for cases where the enemy has not seen a player yet, while the latter 2 are after spotting one. Patrolling is an enemy moving between set points. That's all. The problem is that something as simple as moving from point A to B can actually be hiding unexpected complications. Let me show you what I exactly mean here. How do you guarantee that enemies don't share the same patrolling route targets? How do you guarantee that a patrol route doesn't end up being just moving to an adjacent tile and then back? How do you guarantee that the route for the enemy doesn't end up being a walk across the entire map, invalidating the whole point of a patrol? How do you guarantee that the patrol route is always going to be the exact same route? How should the enemy continue movement if a part of the route ends up blocked by another enemy or player? If a player is on the enemy target square and the enemy tries walking to the end of the route, how do you guarantee that the enemy doesn't end up not seeing the player and then going back to their previous route point? Did you expect something like going from A to B to end up like this? Because I sure didn't. Let's start addressing them. The first problem is easy enough to solve. I already have information about each room and every available tile that they have. If the enemy has been given a position for their patrol route, then just remove it from the list so other enemies can't pick it. However, I've already presented a certain implication here that is necessary to fix the first 3 points. Before adding any enemies, I ask every room to generate points of interest that enemies can then pick out from. It's relatively simple. From all the points it has, it picks a random spot, then removes this point and all points adjacent to it. Keep doing this until you can no longer pick out points and you have a list of possible places where an enemy can go to. The other thing is that every room has a reference to the rooms it's connected to by doors. This way, when an enemy picks a point, they're limited to picking it out in the same room or a connected room, nothing beyond that point. Finally, I made sure that certain rooms do not allow patrol points to be created. so we don't end up with enemies spawning inside your elevator or the entry corridor. With all this info, we solved the second problem due to how the points are made. The third point also ends up solved because we made sure that the enemy has a clear idea on what they're limited by. Now, the patrol route always being the same. This may sound incredibly weird when you first hear it, but look here. This is a genuine problem that I had. The enemy moves from A to B. Great, right? Now, I put a player over here and, oh no, the enemy somehow already knows that someone is blocking the path and decides to go through a different route. The solution for this is that after the enemy has picked out the patrol points, they also generate the first path and store every tile to visit that they can refer to. This way, there is a guarantee that the route is always the exact same. Okay, but now something ends up blocking the path. Now what? What I did here is that if a tile is blocked, the enemy ignores it and tries picking the next first available tile from their route. And if they have one, then patch it into their current blocking path for this turn only. Okay, but this doesn't address target tiles. Here I decided that if the enemy has a route and has not reached the end of their path at the end of their turn, then they try to look at that tile instead. Now the player can't screw around with enemy routes and be invisible in really absurd ways. Oh boy, that was a pain. Unfortunately, investigation is way easier to explain. Players and enemies can walk faster or slower, and they make different amounts of noise. If an enemy hears a player, they build a path from the current position to the tile where they heard the sound coming from. Should they hear something again, this position gets updated again. All that needs to be done is walk to that spot, and if they don't see anyone, go back to patrol mode and patch that path to get back on track. Should an enemy see the player at any point, they get upgraded to hunting mode. It's relatively similar to investigation movement-wise, with a couple of differences. The enemy is now running instead of walking. Their character detection to update the target tile is based on both sight and sound. And any time during the start or end of their movement, if they can't see the player, they ping their surroundings to see all tiles around them, to see if the player is behind them. If they reach the end of their target tile and still can't find the player after one final ping, they get downgraded to search mode. For now, the enemy will be in this mode for 3 turns, and if they don't find the player, they downgrade back to patrol mode. What do they do here? Well, they kinda know where the player is at all times in this mode, but pick a random spot within the room the player is in instead. If they don't find anything at that spot, they ping the spot players behind them, and again, if there's still nothing, pick a new random spot. If they hear a player, search mode gets reset back to 3 turns and they switch their focus point to that tile they heard. Now I am considering lowering search mode to 2 turns though, because from my initial testing it might be a bit too easy for them to just randomly find the player. And you can't really counter this by running away either, because they have way too many turns to get back into your new room. That should be everything for now. As always, plenty of stuff to still do. Anyway, what's next? I think my next video goal should be about adding win conditions so that you can finish level, and interactables, and a system for items to be put in an inventory. No promises on how long until my next video is finished though. Actually, how long have I been working on this right now anyway? 2 years? Yeah, could be worse. Back to work then.